Hi there folks, so I wanted to talk today about what political correctness has done to the British police. The behaviour of the British police seems to be revolving more around publicity stunts, whether it be wearing bear masks, painting their nails, wearing high heels, rather than dealing with actual crime. All around the world, people are laughing at the ineptness of the British police. Take for example this clip of a squad of police struggling to catch one migrant man. And this coming at a time when police recorded crime is up 13%, when London is now declared more dangerous than New York. And we can't put all the blame on budget cuts here. I mean, after all, they seem to find the money, 1.7 million to be precise, to investigate tweets on the internet. They seem to be able to find the money to spray paint patrol cars in LGBT colours. They seem to be able to find the resources to go diving for Korans instead of fighting the 400 loose terrorists roaming around London. So what exactly has political correctness done to the British police? Well, to fully answer this question, I think we need a wee bit of context from the British police history. I think to understand where we are presently, we need to understand where we came from historically. And I think there's quite a bit of insight into the founding principles that formed the police force that really give light to what's gone wrong currently. Around the 11th and 12th century, parishes would actually assign constables. The constables were ordinary citizens and their work was unpaid, and they were expected to carry out their own duties as well as performing their policing duties. As the population grew, it became more and more difficult for the constables to balance these duties, and very often the richest would actually hire someone else to do their policing duties for them. So in about 1663, King Charles II started paying full-time watchmen who became known as Charlies. They were armed with a stick, a lantern and a rattle. Most of the people who performed these watchman duties were actually old men, and so you can imagine they weren't exactly that capable or effective at preventing crime. Some of them were drunk and others were just corrupt. Those were known as the thief takers. They were watchmen who would actually charge people to solve crimes. So in about 1749, the famous author and magistrate Henry Fielding set up a full-time police squad that became known as the Bow Street Runners. They were formally attached to the magistrate's office, so if there was any misconduct, they would be directly accountable to the magistrate. In 1798, a sea captain named John Harriot and magistrate Patrick Cahoon formed a marine police force that would patrol the Thames due to the large amount of crime that was going on with all the imports coming in off the sea. They were funded by a collaboration of sea merchants and they were armed with cutlasses. It became a very well respected force and it unified with the Met in 1839. Many people were concerned about such unifications because they saw this as encroaching power and centralised policing force that they were afraid would abuse the citizenry and take away their individual freedoms. Of course, one massive incident that sparked such fears was the Peterloo Massacre in 1819. In this event, there was a protest by the Manchester Patriotic Union that was seeking parliamentary reforms. A cavalry was sent in to disperse the crowd and around 400 to 700 were injured and 15 were killed. This was a major event and it shaped the way that Sir Robert Peel ended up forming his police. Sir Robert Peel understood the citizens' concerns in this regard, but he also understood the need for a unified police force. Sir Robert Peel became the Home Secretary in 1822 and in 1829 he established the Met Police. He believed that the police should revolve around crime prevention rather than crime punishment, and he understood the importance of good public relations. Even the dress code reflected this. The first police force was wearing civilian-style clothes like a top hat and a swallowtail coat so as to be relatable to the public. However, he also understood that they needed to be effective, and so he set out stricter criteria for those who wanted to join the police. They had to be under 35 years old, at least 5'7", in fit shape with a good bill of health, and had to be able to defend themselves and others. The police were founded upon the 9 principles of policing. Sometimes this is referred to as the 9 Peelian principles. Although Sir Robert Peel didn't actually write them himself, it was actually the first and joint commissioners, Charles Rowan and Richard Mayne. But they were heavily influenced by Sir Robert Peel's philosophy on the police. I think it's really important to know these principles because not only is it a historical tradition that the police were built upon, it's supposed to act as a guide to how the police should conduct their behaviour. And to be quite frank, I don't think that the modern day British police force are really conducting themselves as Peel would have wanted. So let's start then. Number 1. To prevent crime and disorder as an alternative to their repression by military force and severity of legal punishment. Number 2. To recognise always that the power of the police to fulfil their functions and duties is dependent upon public approval of their existence, actions and behaviour, and on their ability to secure and maintain public respect. Number 3. To recognise always that to secure and maintain the respect and approval of the public means also the securing of the willing cooperation of the public in the task of securing observance of laws. Number 4. To recognise always that the extent to which the cooperation of the public can be secured diminishes proportionately the necessity of the use of physical force and compulsion for achieving police objectives. Now, I think that number 5 could be the single most important Pelian principle. Number 5. To seek and preserve public favour, not by pandering to public opinion, but by consistently demonstrating absolutely impartial service to law, in complete independence of policy, and without regard to the justice or injustice of the substance of individual service and friendship to all members of the public, without regard to their wealth or social standing, by ready exercise of courtesy and friendly good humour, and by ready offering of individual sacrifice in protecting and preserving life. So really what that principle is talking about is the importance of impartiality and not giving preference to one group over another. And I'm going to demonstrate this really soon, and the importance of that. Number 6. To use physical force only when the exercise of persuasion, advice and warning is found to be insufficient to obtain public cooperation to an extent necessary to secure observance of law or to restore order, and to use only the minimum degree of physical force which is necessary on any particular occasion for achieving a police objective. Number 7. To maintain at all times a relationship with the public that gives reality to the historic tradition that the police are the public and that the public are the police. The police being only members of the public who are paid to give full-time attention to duties which are incumbent on every citizen in the interests of community welfare and existence. Number 8. To recognise always the need for strict adherence to police executive functions, and to refrain from even seeming to usurp the powers of the judiciary of avenging individuals or the state, and of authoritatively judging guilt and punishing the guilty. Number 9. To recognise always that the test of police efficiency is the absence of crime and disorder, and not the visible evidence of police action in dealing with them. So as you can see, the police were founded upon principles of impartiality, cooperation, but yet effective law enforcement. These things are really important in making sure that the police remain effective yet fair. So with all that in mind, then let's take a look at some of the crime statistics today and see what's going on with the police and the criminal and justice system. First of all, let's take a look at the Office for National Statistics Crime Report of 2017. In Figure 1 we can see the overall crime statistics for England and Wales. There are two sets of data on this. The bars along the bottom represent police recorded crime. This is where we get our increase of 13% crime from. The lines across the top represent criminal statistics from the Crime Survey for England and Wales. The difference is that the Crime Survey for England and Wales conducts face-to-face interviews, and so more often than not they'll actually catch crimes that haven't been reported to the police. This is one of the reasons why their overall crime rate is lowering. And so the gap between actual police recorded crimes and crimes that have went unreported is actually narrowing. Now this may on face value seem like a good thing, but of course we do have to bear in mind that there are certain types of crime that are on the rise. I want you to try and notice a correlation between the types of crime that are on the rise. For instance, in Figure 3, this shows the increase in knife crime rising from 29,000 incidents in 2016 to 37,000 incidents in 2017. I wonder who could be responsible for that. Figure 4 shows the increase in sexual offences including rape. I wonder who could be responsible for that. Or how about the 711 deaths or serious injuries caused by illegal driving, a 6% rise from that recorded in the previous year. I wonder who could be responsible for that. Or how about the 208 acid attacks that occurred this year? I wonder who could be responsible for that. So did you happen to notice a trend there? According to the Ministry of Justice, the National Offender Management Service Offender Equality's Annual Report of 2015-2016, bit of a mouthful there, reads the following. The proportion of Muslim prisoners has grown steadily between 2002 and 2016. In 2002, Muslims made up 7.7% of the prison population. As at March 2016, this figure was 14.7%. This compares with 4.2% of those aged 15 or over declaring their religious belief as Muslim in the 2011 census. Muslims today make up just 6.3% of the overall UK population, yet they make up 14.7% of the UK prison population. This makes them the single most overrepresented religious group in UK prisons. This is also backed up by earlier studies from 2012 showing similar results. For whatever reason, it seems as though the police don't want to acknowledge this openly, although I would find it difficult to believe that they can't even see this sort of pattern occurring. But they are willing to talk about hate crime on the other hand, or probably distract us with hate crime as it were. According to the Home Office, there was 80,393 instances of hate crime in 2017, a rise of 29% compared to the 62,518 in 2016. They immediately go on to try and blame Brexit for this. In their own words, the increase over the last year is thought to reflect both a genuine rise in hate crime around the time of the EU referendum and also due to ongoing improvements in crime recording by the police. The Office for National Statistics have stated that the increases in recent years in police-recorded violence against the person and public order offences have been driven by improvements in police recording. Around 9 in 10 hate crime offences recorded by the police are in these two offence groups. It doesn't say who committed these hate crimes in and around the time of the EU referendum. For all we really know, it could have been people attacking Brexiters. Without the actual figures, we can only really speculate. Another point worth considering is the improved recording procedures. It may have been the case that the crime statistics were a bit more consistent, but due to the fact that the procedures were improved, this artificially raised the amount of reported crimes. I'm not saying that accounts for all of it, but it could be a factor worth considering. Now here's something very important worth noting. It's the definition that the Home Office gives for hate crime. In their words, any criminal offence which is perceived by the victim or any other person to be motivated by hostility or prejudice towards someone based on a personal characteristic. With that sort of definition based on perception, is it really any wonder that someone like Count Dankula could be facing jail time for posting a joke video on the internet about his girlfriend's dog being a Nazi? But here's something that really got on my nerves. They have the audacity to suggest that terror attacks like the Manchester Arena attack are not actual hate crimes, even though they admit it's motivated by hate. Let's read the paragraph. An offence may be motivated by hatred towards a characteristic that is not centrally monitored and therefore would not be part of the data in the statistical bulletin. Operationally, such an offence could be investigated as a hate crime by the police. This may include terror offences. As the College of Police and Operational Guidance states, there is a clear overlap between hate crime and terror activity. Not all hate crime is linked to extremism and terrorism, but it is unlikely that a terrorist act will not be motivated by hate. Terrorist activity such as the Manchester Arena attack may be targeted against general British or Western values rather than one of 5 specific strands, so while the attack may be identified as a hate crime, it could not be covered by this statistical collection. Conversely, the Finsbury Park mosque attack did appear to be against a specific religion, so would be included as a hate crime for the purposes of this collection. The part I'm having trouble understanding is, if we're Islamophobic for criticising Islamic values, how is it not racist to attack British people for British values? It seems absolutely hypocritical. An interesting figure worth showing is figure 2.6. This shows the outcome of reported crimes, and in the graph you can see that roughly for most cases only 10 to 20% of reported hate crimes actually end up with a charge or a summons. This could be a suggestion that hate crime is actually overreported. Figure A3 shows reported hate crimes in relation to certain events, such as the EU referendum or terrorist attacks. The reason why I think this is interesting is because they seem to make such a big song and dance about the rise of hate crime in and around the time of terrorist attacks. You see, the concern is the hate crime, not the terrorist attacks. I don't know what's going on there. With the police wasting so much time on quote-unquote hate crime, it seems as though they're not actually dealing with the people who are committing actual crimes. The UK is absolutely plagued with Asian rape gangs. I mean, look at Aylesbury, Banbury, Bristol, Derby, Halifax, Keighley, Newcastle, Oxford, Peterborough, Rochdale, Rotherham, Or Telford. How are we supposed to effectively deal with these sort of problems if we're afraid to be called silly names for acknowledging who's responsible for it, for acknowledging the overrepresentation of these types of crimes in the UK? And it's not like it gets any better in prison either. There are gangs of Muslims who are trying to forcefully convert inmates to Islam. Prison guards are afraid to deal with growing terror cells due to political correctness. Letting Islam off the hook like this arguably overturns the 5th and the 9th Palian principles. The 5th obviously talking about impartiality, and the 9th talking about the effectiveness of police being the absence of crime. How can you make crime go away if you're not even willing to acknowledge it? But it's not just Islam responsible for overturning the 5th Palian principle. The very existence of LGBT units within the police overturns the 5th principle because it shows that the police have sided with an ideology. And of course these units are wasting taxpayer money through silly publicity stunts. Take for instance the Sussex Police, who wasted £750 decorating 2 patrol cars with pride colours. And so it's no surprise that with the level of power given to the LGBT units, they would inevitably end up abusing it. The Met LGBT unit were accused of threatening a man after they had an argument with him on Twitter. They sent him a message that read, "Delighted you've taken an interest in us. We'll take an interest too. Open source is a goldmine. Give my love to blank." And this was naming a family member of the guy who was responsible. The implication there was that they were going to threaten to use, find, or release information that they would have had privileged access to being in the police. I mean, that's just completely unacceptable. That arguably overturns all the Palian principles except for those dealing with physical force. For some reason, our police seem absolutely obsessed with catching all the thought criminals on Twitter. For instance, Scotland Yard has set up a Twitter police task force costing 1.7 million of taxpayers' money and receiving an additional £452,756 from the Home Office. This is completely frivolous spending. One of the reasons that Sir Robert Peel set up the police force the way he did, respecting the community and the people, was to preserve their individual freedoms. Just like the Peterloo massacre, he wanted people to be able to express their grievances without fear of repercussion. So to wrap this up, what has political correctness done to the British police? Well, arguably, it's overturned the historical traditions and the founding principles upon which the police force were built. It's given up its impartiality in favour of siding with ideologies. It's failing to protect some of our most vulnerable citizens because of its failure to acknowledge where crime is really occurring. It's wasted taxpayer money through misallocations and frivolous spending. Arguably a good thing then that their budget is contracting. It's turning the UK into a nightmare police state, one that's stripping us of our right to protest, our freedom of speech and expression. Well, that's my thoughts. Thanks for watching the video and feel free to leave a comment down below.